Konnichiwa.
It's history in the making, and we want you to be part of it.
That's a given.
Talking about people who are changing the game.
You guys have run a tight ship here. Oh my gosh.
The rock star sitting here.
I can't even describe it.
Talking about actual business.
Two beings at the top of their professions.
Started.
Lightning quick movements.
Changing
The rock star sitting here. It's just started.
That's right, my friends. We are just getting started. Good morning and welcome back to the Real Value Podcast, the podcast about real estate appraising, lending, success, communication, value, and, well, how it all fits together. Welcome back, my friends. My name is Blaine Feyen, and I am your host for this and every episode of the Real Value Podcast. I'd like to give a big, hearty thank you to all of our new subscribers this week. Of course, a big nod of appreciation to all of those who have been with us for the time that we have been on the interwebs. But a big thank you to all of our new subscribers. We appreciate you coming along for the ride. We hope that we are offering you valuable content in the process. With the new subscribers, of course, and more interaction comes questions, and we've had some questions from some of the subscribers, so I thought I'd start out the episode by answering some of the questions. And actually the questions that have been coming in from a few of you are technical questions, not about appraising, but about the podcast itself, which I really appreciate because I've been doing this in several industries for many years now, and some of you have commented on the audio quality, which I really appreciate. We have added, of course, a YouTube channel. So we are filming it. Of course, as I've said before, there's not much to see. It's just me, and I'm not necessarily, I've said that I have a face made for radio. So the video channel, by the way, the YouTube channel, is primarily for those who, of course, want to consume content on YouTube. I'm consuming content on YouTube almost all day long while I'm doing appraisals and other stuff. I have it going on one of my screens typically, or somewhere in the background, whether it's a talk, a debate, some kind of training, or something interesting that I can learn from. But also as a way to do SEO. And for those of you who don't know SEO, it's search engine optimization. It's a way to get more content out on the internet, add content to your website or to wherever you're posting content. Of course, you can make it keyword rich, so you can put keywords into the YouTube videos. So part of our content strategy, and I would recommend this to anybody who is building a content strategy, is if you're going to undertake to do something like this, like a podcast, or if you're video focused and you want to primarily do video, understand that, of course, when you do video or you do audio, well, I should say when you do video, you have potentially 3 and sometimes 4 pieces of content that you can deliver. With video, of course, you have the actual video. But with video, you have video and you have audio. And then, of course, you have your spoken word. And your spoken word can then be transcribed into a blog post. And that's, in essence, what I do. I record the video. So I have the video that I can upload to YouTube. I have the audio that I extract, and actually we're drawing the audio not from the camera, although I do have a nice microphone on the camera. That's just to make sure that I actually get audio, and I always have the microphone on my cameras. But we are grabbing it from a Tascam digital, you can't see it in the podcast, but a digital audio recorder that is hooked up to a nice Audio-Technica microphone, running through an 802 VLZ 4-channel mixing board. If you're watching on YouTube, let's see, I'll try to move out of the way. You might be able to see the little red light blinking behind me and all the cords coming out of the 4-channel mixing board. The camera we are recording on at this point is the Sony A7 III. We have been recording on the Panasonic G85, and I also have a Canon 70D that I record with as well, and a whole host of different lenses. It's a hobby of mine, videography and photography, as well as doing the podcast. So those of you who have asked, that's the equipment we're using. And by the way, and my headphones are Audio-Technica headphones. I use an iPad 10.5 for my notes directly in front of me. And then we have an additional screen that I can see myself through the camera on another tablet in front of me. So a nice technical setup. Now, I will say that you don't need all of this to do a podcast or to do video. I'm something of a technophile, so I love new technology. I love my cameras. I love quality audio. And so over the years, I have built this up. The mixing board behind me, of course, has multiple microphones plugged into it and other cords and stuff coming out of it. So when we do Skype interviews, we can do what's called a mix minus, so that the person on the other end of the line, the interviewee on the Skype, they don't get feedback, they don't hear themselves twice, and so on and so forth. But anyway, Sony A7 III camera, Rode Mini microphone on top, Audio-Technica microphone in front of me, and a mixing board with a Tascam digital audio recorder for all the audio. So hope that helps. Hope that answers your questions. For those of you interested, you don't need all of this. You can literally podcast into your iPhone, your Galaxy phone, whatever phone you have. Obviously, when you're doing a podcast, the spoken word only, where there is no video, audio is super, super important. I see realtors and lenders doing audio and podcasts and videos and stuff all the time, and I think the audio quite often is horrendous, and audio is super, super important. The content, of course, is always the most important. So when I teach my courses, I tell people content, and content is king. Quality content always trumps poor quality content. And if it's a race between good quality content and crappy production quality, or really killer production quality and crappy content, I would say go for killer content and crappy production quality. Just get it out there. But anytime you can upgrade your production quality, do so. And audio is super important. So again, that's what we're doing. Appreciate you listening along. We hope that the audio quality as well as the video quality is up to your standards. The topic of today's episode, let's get right into it now. It comes up in my office on a weekly basis, so I wanted to have a chat with all of you about it. I've noticed that if I'm experiencing or hearing from people or seeing something, noticing something, likely everybody else is too. And the topic today is trainees, or said another way, topic is mentorship. Depending on the position you're viewing it from, either as a mentor or as a trainee, or as a wannabe trainee, which is, of course, the title of this episode. So you want to be an appraiser. I know, folks, it's not wanna. Want is not a proper word. It's want to. But I just thought it was a catchy way to title this episode without making it too technical. So as I wrote the episode, I imagined writing the episode or kind of making my notes as if it was a letter from a father to a son, a mother to a daughter, or, of course, a mentor to an apprentice, on, say, the most important things to focus on in life. Something like that. One of those kind of letters. Like, here's the most important things that you should be focusing on. It's, of course, more specific than that. And my hope for this episode is that all of the players in the relationship, the mentors, the apprentices, can gain some value from the discussion, which means, of course, the appraisers who are currently mentoring and training somebody. That's one. Those who are thinking of bringing on a trainee. That's two. Those who currently have apprentices under somebody. I should say those who are apprentices under somebody else's tutelage. That's three. And those who are on the search. And this episode is going to be a lot about those who are on the search. Those of you searching for a mentor, somebody to train them. In fact, I'm going to do a separate podcast specifically for those who currently are or are thinking of becoming a mentor. Okay, so this episode is about apprentices. But I'm going to do a separate episode. In fact, I suspect, as I'm starting to write my notes out over the last couple of weeks, that it's going to be a multi-episode process because there's so many topics in just that one category, mentoring. But I'm going to somebody who's thinking about becoming a mentor, bringing somebody into their business to train, because it's how the business is built, right? We've seen a decline in our numbers over the last several years. Of course, there's market conditions that weigh into that. There's timing, there's business issues, but a lot of it also has to do with an aging appraiser population and an unwillingness to train. And along with that, maybe under that as a subcategory, is just not really good at training, not knowledgeable in all that goes into doing that. And after all, it's how we all got into the appraisal business. It's how every appraiser out there got into the appraisal business. It's how every new appraiser being birthed this year or next is being introduced into the appraisal business, and how every appraiser after us is likely to be introduced into the appraisal industry. Unless, of course, there are some changes. We're seeing some changes come through now. My state has adopted the new licensing hour requirements and classroom requirements and all that. So unless something changes drastically with the requirements in the future whereby an apprenticeship is no longer needed, which could happen, then mentorship is still going to be the main path. We are the gatekeepers, so to speak, and you'll hear me use that word throughout the podcast and in future podcasts. Being a mentor, as you know, if you are one, and even if you aren't, you had one. Being a mentor is a huge responsibility. Takes a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of resources, a lot of patience, and often, for some, very little reward. Now, of course, it can be financial reward, but there's also expense that comes with it. There's a lot of benefits in doing so, but we all know that many appraisers, myself included, were once trained by somebody that we're no longer associated with. And trainees often make the mistake of saying flat out, I need somebody to train me so that I can go out on my own someday. We get this all the time. I see it in the forums all the time on the Facebook posts and things. People will just put flat out there, I'm looking for a mentor. I need to get my hours. Well, what you're really saying is I need to get my hours so that I can go off and become an independent appraiser like you are. And this, of course, steers many would-be mentors away from wanting to train anybody because they believe, and maybe rightly so, that they're training their future competition, right? We all understand this. And again, I'm going to talk in these future podcasts on mentorship about how this doesn't have to be the case, but I totally get it. I'm somebody, you likely are somebody, you left your mentor for whatever reason, whether it was amicable or not, and you, in essence, became their competition. So I understand the sentiment. It's true, by the way, in almost every industry, and I've been in multiple, where somebody learns a skill or a trade from the mentor and eventually decides that they can do it better, faster, cheaper. Maybe they can earn more money, be more independent, or whatever causes the apprentice to venture off into the world, hang their shingle, their signage, their name, and get into business. Michael Gerber, the author of The E-Myth, if you haven't read that book, I highly recommend as a business owner reading that. There's the E-Myth Revisited. It's been updated over the years. But he calls this their entrepreneurial seizure. It's that moment when somebody says, hey, I'm really good at this thing, whether it's a hairstylist, an appraiser, an auto mechanic, or a baker, and they say, well, I bet I'll be really good at running a business doing that thing, styling hair, baking muffins, or being an appraiser. And they find out, of course, after starting their business and running it for a little while, that in almost every case, it's vastly different than just doing the thing, just being an appraiser or a baker or a stylist. And it's no different in the appraiser world. As almost all of my appraiser colleagues, those of you that are independent appraisers or business owners with multiple appraisers working for you, can attest to. Whether you're running a business of multiple appraisers, a brick and mortar office, which with staff and equipment, all that stuff costs money, or you're a single person home office working for somebody else, is different than having somebody work for you. And we all understand the struggle. It's not quite the same when you go off on your own. So lest I digress too far into that whole other episode or series of podcasts that I'm going to do on mentorship, let's get right into today's topic, which is a conglomeration, if you will, a collection of all of the conversations that I have had over the past 18 plus years with those seeking an apprenticeship with me, my company or companies, and any of the appraisers in my office over that same period. Now, of course, this does include my experience running a large martial arts academy with multiple live-in students, and also being an apprentice under somebody else. So it's a conglomeration of all those things, and the bigger topic is about how to add value to the mentor. Now, I kind of wish, as I wrote this episode, that I was thinking back that I had kept all of the resumes, all the emails, all the voicemail inquiries that we've received over the past 18 years in this business of people seeking to become an appraiser. And if really for no other reason than to be able to kind of go through them and count them up and see where those people are today. I'd really love to know how many there were, and where they are, what they're doing, if they ever ended up finding a mentor, and then what that path, if it could have been a documentary following somebody, and then 10 years later we look back and see what the whole chain has been. And what I can tell you is that, like everything else in life and in our businesses, there have been ebbs and flows of these resumes and phone calls depending on what the market is doing. But the interesting thing, and the motivation for today's episode, in fact, is that regardless of the number of people we have had over the years trying to get into the appraisal industry, the appraiser business, looking for a mentor, and by the way, I know it's in the hundreds for sure, maybe thousands over an 18-year period, but likely hundreds anyway. They have all been more or less the same in one regard, and this is it. They've all come to us with a handout, asking for something. Hey, can you teach me? Can you train me? I need my hours. I want to become an appraiser, so on and so forth. They've all come to us in the same way, with a handout and not an offer, meaning not an offer to help in my business. They've all come by way of a mailed resume, some with a follow-up phone call or an email, which is proper, some not. Some have come via just a phone call, no resume, or an email even. Some with a stop into the office to inquire. However they chose to seek out the opportunity. Not one that I can remember in 18 years has ever come to me and said, Blaine, I would love to talk to you about how I can make your business better. Or, Blaine, I'd really appreciate an opportunity to chat with you about what I think I can bring to your business. Or, hey, Blaine, I know you're a super busy man, and if you'd give me simply 15 or 20 minutes of your time, I'd love to chat with you about how I think I can enhance your life, your work, your business, your income, your time off, ease your workload, make you more profitable, help your business grow, get more business in a particular area that maybe you're not, add more time to your day, etc., whatever it is. And it's almost endless, by the way. Because you see, the age-old dilemma that almost every corporation everywhere deals with, except maybe factories, where they only need, heartbeats and bodies to fill stations and watch units roll off the assembly lines. And I'm not knocking factory workers. I'm just saying that the skill level required quite often, not always, quite often is minimal. But it's the dilemma of the overall cost to bring a new hire on. The time and the resource cost, of course, to train them adds to that. The potential loss in productivity doing so, the potential loss in revenue during that time you're training somebody, the potential for mistakes, the potential for lawsuits, the potential for a negative change in corporate or office culture because of this person, and the unknowns that come with every new person being interviewed and ultimately hired for a position within a company. They're vast. They're large. Small companies like ours, typically, less than maybe 50 employees, of course, they feel these effects much deeper than larger companies. Large companies tend to have larger budgets with which to absorb all their loaded costs, they're called, that come with every new hire. What is not different, however, between large and small companies is the assumption that whomever they decide to bring into the company is the best person for that particular position, in that the person they bring on will bring something the company has not had before. Now, not in every case. Some cases the company is looking simply to fill the shoes, for example, of somebody who's left or maybe moved up in the corporation. But almost every good company and industry is looking for a candidate who will bring some value to the company. And how they do that, of course, depends on the job they've been hired to do, the widgets that particular company makes or sells, or the service that the particular company provides. And the opportunities to add value in each of those environments comes down to the new hire or the employee. Now, with an appraisal business, the opportunities are almost endless in ways that somebody could bring or add value. And we're going to talk about some of them in this episode. So hopefully you have your talking pad, as Zig Ziglar always called it, your legal pad, your notepad, some kind of note-taking device to write some of these things down. And it's not that I think what I have to say is so noteworthy that by not taking notes you won't remember these things, but I can assure you, you won't. The reality is that our brains are intricately linked to our bodies in such a way that when you engage in the physical act of note-taking, you actually write something down, you're using your hand, a pen, a pencil on paper, specifically just writing, you're actively taking what's entering your ears, in this case, you're listening, you're hearing, and you're writing notes, and you're ushering it into the physical world by writing it down. And this does several things. I'm going to go off on a slight tangent, which is going to lead to some of the bonus content not included in this episode. So if you want to hear the bonus content, by the way, you just have to go over to realvaluecast.com or realvaluegroup.com. You'll see a little box for your name and email address, and excuse me, we will mail you the bonus content. But when you write something down, it cements it in a different portion of your brain than just hearing something does. There's the auditory centers, there's the visual centers. And then the kinesthetic centers. Kinesthetic means you're doing something, you're feeling something. And so when you write something down, it activates a different portion of your brain than just hearing something does. It also activates something in your immediate surroundings that makes it more likely for you to remember, for positive change to occur. In essence, it's literally changing the vibrations in the air around you and activating all sorts of things that wouldn't have been activated otherwise. And of course, 3, by actually writing something down, you activate what I call the law of the onion. And this leads into some of the bonus content. I'm not going to expand on the law of the onion here. I have done a whole separate podcast. It's very short, 15 or 20 minutes, and I explain the law of the onion. Just know that, of course, by writing notes down as you listen to things, whether it's this podcast or any others, you are more likely to have better recall and also better comprehension and understanding. So now that we have the reasons why to take notes clearly out of the way, let's get back to the chat about trainees, mentorship, new hires, and that topic. And when we left off, I was just getting to the point that every new hire in a company is expected to do certain things. They're expected to do the job descriptions that come with that particular position, of course, but they're also expected on some level to bring some kind of added value to the position, even if it's never spoken. The added value may simply be bringing a smiling face, a good attitude around the office. It may also be finding new and more efficient ways to do some tasks. Whatever it is, no good company would ever turn away an employee who's adding value. In fact, some of the greatest business stories out there are those of your average employee or worker who had an idea or took something of little value, and then within the confines of their job description and whatever else they were doing, they turned it into something of tremendous value. Like the sticky note, for example. If you don't know how the sticky note came about, study 3M and that particular story. So what does this all have to do with trainees? Well, it has everything to do with trainees and those seeking to get into, potential or future trainees. Anybody seeking to get into the appraisal and appraiser business, because every good appraiser could likely use somebody bringing some additional value. The problem is often that those already in the business tend to see things through what I would call jaded, tired, worn-out eyes. Or they just simply see them through the industry paradigm, the way they were brought up in the industry, the way they learned things. And of course, those not yet in the business, those coming into the business, wherever they may have come from, whatever their background may have been, they see things through the eyes of their, of course, previous work experience, their upbringing, their paradigm of the world, or through the eyes of somebody who taught their licensing class, which is usually one of those older, more experienced, aging appraisers who may have given them some advice. I'm doing air quotes with my fingers. And or maybe somebody they know in the business told them, here's what it's like. But either way, oftentimes there's no meeting of the minds between these two groups, the mentor and the apprentice or potential trainee, because the existing appraisers, the ones holding the golden key to getting into the business, the gatekeepers, again, there's that word, if you will, they want nothing to do with somebody who just wants to steal their time, steal the mentor's time. And it may not be that obvious. It may not be that hostile. I'm saying steal, which is a negative word. But ultimately, a lot of time goes into training apprentices. So no mentor wants somebody who's just going to come in and steal their time, get enough hours to break free, become independent, potentially steal the mentor's clientele, and potentially become competition in their market. And of course, there's a host of other issues that lead existing appraisers to not wanting to train somebody. But again, I'm going to talk about those in future episodes on mentorship. But a lot of it comes down to simply leadership. There's not a ton of leadership in this industry, and it's because it's fractured. It's because there's so many independent appraisers. I'm going to give you a few ideas about how to go about mentorship the right way. And I think if you are a mentor currently and you are listening to this episode, you hopefully will get some of that juice, some of the value, even though I'm talking primarily to potential new hires, new trainees, new apprentices. But hopefully you'll pick up some tips and value from it. So as I started off the episode saying, I haven't had one resume, phone call, or email from a trainee candidate in 18 years offering anything what I would call unique, creative, or value added to my business by way of their apprenticeship. Now that's not to say none of them brought value. Let me say it again. I haven't had one resume, one email, one phone call, one stop into the office from a potential trainee or a trainee candidate in the whole time I've been appraising offering anything unique, creative, or value added. Offering is the key word. It's not to say they weren't creative once they got in, but it took leadership within the office. It took my direction and guidance to bring that creativity and unique value out of them. None of them came with it. When I was at my first company, we had a huge stack of resumes, and they came in every single week. With my second company, once I left that company, started my own second company, we had a huge stack of resumes that came in probably on the order of several per month. And then my current business receives, I would say, again, several per month on average, whether it's a phone call, email, resume, whatever. I think this is probably the reduction in resumes, again, is a statement about the industry as a whole, because we've seen some decline in our numbers. But as I mentioned at the beginning, that decline says something about what's going on. It's not just the industry. My business has grown exponentially every year except for 2007 and 2008 probably, and 9, the mortgage meltdown. But every year after that, it's grown exponentially. So the lack of leadership and mentorship and the unwillingness of many to train others, having it not be advantageous, is what's leading to a large degree to the decline. So as somebody looking to get into the appraisal business, whether you're now just looking, maybe you're already licensed, you took your classes before you found a mentor, so you're seeking a mentor. Maybe you had one and it didn't work out. This happens as well. Whatever stage in the process you may be, if you're still out there calling around or sending out resumes that say, hey, Blaine, I'd make a great worker. I'm looking to get my hours. I need somebody to help me. I'm seeking a mentor. I'll come do office work, whatever it might be. Stop. I'm just going to say it now. Stop. Don't send out, stop completely. Don't send out one more resume, one more email, or make one more phone call. I'm not telling you to get out of the business. I'm saying just stop for right now. You need to stop. You need to think. You need to regroup. You need to revamp your message. And I'm not talking about just revamping your words in some kind of semantic trickery. This is not a tactic I'm going to teach to fool a potential mentor into bringing you on, where then you can steal all their business and all their time. No. I'm talking about rethinking this whole thing so that it doesn't just benefit you. I'm talking about a mindset here. You see, I have experience in training, of course, apprentices, but I have deeper experience in being an apprentice, a protege of a mentor. And I've talked about that in previous episodes about my background in Aikido and Zen. And this idea of the mentor and the apprentice goes back literally thousands of years. The mentor traditionally handpicked the apprentice with a specific goal in mind, but the goal wasn't self-centered, one that only benefited the mentor. One of the goals of the mentor was to build up the protege. And I'm using the word protege. If you don't know what that is, look it up, because it means a little bit more than just apprentice. But the goal of the mentor was to build up the protege, in essence, in their image, with the hopes that someday the protege may succeed. It's always one of the goals of a good mentor. But here's the key. Or even exceed the mentor. Did you hear what I said? The goal was for the mentor to help the protege succeed or even exceed the mentor. The mentor chose very carefully, knowing, of course, that that individual was of good moral character, suited maybe uniquely in some way for that particular task, whether they were a blacksmith or a sushi maker or martial artist or a craftsman, whatever it was. So they had to be suited for whatever the task was that they were being trained for. But most importantly, the protege would bring some added value to the mentor to help the mentor develop more fully as an individual, as a teacher, as a business person. And of course, with that came a sense of loyalty that exceeded the business relationship between the protege or the apprentice and the mentor. Now, let me say that again, because this is super important for all the mentors out there, the people training. When you teach something, you become better at it. So one of the reasons I have been mentoring for 20 plus years in different industries is because when you mentor, you become better. So the protege that you seek, or that has been sought for thousands of years, is a protege that would bring some added value to the mentor, but ultimately somebody that would help the mentor develop more fully as an individual, help the mentor develop more fully as a teacher, and in teaching, they started to understand their own business from a deeper level. In fact, I would recommend anytime you're taking a Con Ed course or you're taking an industry course on something maybe you don't know about, you don't think of it from the standpoint of a newbie or a neophyte, somebody who doesn't know anything about this particular topic. You actually start thinking about it like a teacher. And as you're listening and taking in the information, you're at the same time simultaneously thinking, how would you also teach this to somebody else? And your comprehension will be different than if you were just listening as somebody who didn't know the information. And I'm going to talk about that too. I do talk about that in the Law of the Onion, because that is part of the Law of the Onion. So the apprentice, the protege, was chosen to help them develop as a teacher, of course as a business person, if they're in business. And with that came this greater sense of loyalty between the apprentice and the mentor. And again, if you've listened to any of the previous episodes where I talk about my experience living in the Aikido and Zen school, you'll know that I speak from experience, not only because I was mentored by somebody else in the appraisal business, and by several actually. My mentor, I would say, great guy, but he literally took me out on 2 inspections and said, take some pictures and draw us. He showed me briefly how to draw a sketch. Fortunately, we had a lot of people, a lot of appraisers in our company, and so all of the other appraisers taught me when I first came into the business. It was a great experience and a great way to be brought into the business. So I speak from some experience that way, but it's also because I was that protege under a master of a particular art. And I highly value that mentor protege or mentor trainee apprentice, whatever you feel comfortable calling it. I value that relationship. And I'm a big proponent of it for our industry, by the way, if it's carried out the right way. When it comes to the apprentice or the trainee, of course, as we call them in our industry, the relationship is often set, unfortunately, right from the beginning by the mentor as one of boss and noob, boss and employee, boss and grunt, somebody who's going to carry out all the tasks that, the mentor doesn't necessarily like or want to do. And the student or employee learns in the process. And I'm not necessarily knocking this type of training, by the way. That's how I experienced a lot of my growth in all of the industries that I've been in. It's part of that whole mentor-trainee relationship. I think it's good for the apprentice to have to struggle and hustle like we did when we were in training. And that often means doing the stuff that the mentor and others don't like doing. But they, of course, did when they were coming up through the industry. And it likely means taking some of the orders that the mentor doesn't want to in maybe areas that they don't normally service. That's one of the benefits of bringing on a trainee, is eventually they can cover markets and areas, maybe open an office eventually in an area that you didn't normally cover. So orders that the mentor wouldn't typically take, and just generally doing some of the things that the mentor doesn't want to do. So before we get into what I call the tactical and practical advice for future trainees, let me caveat all of this. Let me give you a warning, a disclaimer, that of course none of this is guaranteed to get you anything at all from anybody. But it is absolutely guaranteed that if you keep approaching a potential mentor with the typical request that we tend to see, if they are seeking some additional help in their office that they haven't found already, or they haven't started using virtual assistants, which I recommend, things like that for staff positions, non-appraisal positions, they may take you on. They may utilize you for their purposes and to achieve their own goals, but you'll be used in a way that they see fit for their business, meaning they'll set out what they see as beneficial for you based on ultimately what's beneficial for them and what their goals are, with only probably a passing nod to the fact that you might be trying to gain some work hours. They know that, of course, going into the deal. However, I feel that in that situation, the relationship begins on the wrong foot right from the get-go. So this is a message for the mentors as well as the potential trainees. If the mentor knows, if you come to them and basically say that you're just in it for the training and the hours, they know they have you for several years. You can get licensed in whatever time period is your state has adopted. But of course, there are lenders who won't even let you fill out an application, or AMCs that won't let you fill out an application unless you have 3 to 5 years of experience under somebody else. But there's a whole nother aspect to our industry, whole other markets like attorneys and estate planners, financial planners, those kind of things that you can leave once you get licensed and be very successful in business. So if you go to a mentor with basically just the attitude that I'm trying to get my hours to become independent, they're going to use you for their own selfish desires to do more appraisal work, take on new clients, whatever the reason may be. And again, that doesn't make them bad people. Just now that I'm speaking to the trainee, I'm saying you can't go into it with that attitude, because resentment ultimately will be the primary motivating factor at play on both sides of the relationship. It may not be apparent at first, but it will grow. You want your hours, and you're willing to suffer for some predetermined time, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, whatever it may be, knowing that there's light at the end of the tunnel when you reach your minimum number of required hours, or when you get enough experience and comfort that you feel you can do it. Of course, again, it doesn't mean you've arrived anywhere because of those lenders who won't even look at you. But nevertheless, you plod, you plan for the day when, with delight, you can pack up, move on, start your own business. And of course, the mentor goes into this maybe thinking you'll be around forever, only to be awestruck and shattered when the relationship breaks down and ends because you weren't paying them enough money, or the splits weren't right, whatever it might cause a trainee to leave. So it goes similarly for both trainee and mentor. And I understand this isn't always the way it goes. I know there are many trainees or existing appraisers out there who bless their mentor and maybe even still work with them 5, 10, 15, 20 years later. But there's definitely a stereotype in this regard, and I've been studying it pretty deeply now for almost 15 years, learning the metrics of our industry, learning the metrics of offices and businesses so that I can optimize my own. But the stories abound and the numbers bear it out. The vast majority of appraisers are 1 to 3 person offices. And how did they get that way? By following the path that almost all take, which is some path to perceived independence via the independent appraiser route. After all, isn't it one of the main selling points for people to get into it? Isn't it how we ultimately got into it, one way or another? You didn't like what you were doing. You heard about this. Maybe you were in real estate. Maybe you were a lender. Maybe you were a factory worker. And you saw this other thing and you thought, hey, I could do that. You had an appraiser come to your house to appraise your house for a refi or a purchase. You saw that process and went, I wonder how they get into boy, that looks like fun. They get outside part of the day. They work on the computer. I can do all that stuff. And then you start digging into it and oh my gosh, they can work in their underwear in their basement. Amazing. I want to do that. So before you make any request whatsoever as a trainee to a potential mentor in your market, sit down and I want you to do a couple things. I want you to write out all the skills and abilities you have. Now, if you listen to the last episode about adding value, this is going to sound very familiar because it's a very similar process. You write out all of your past work experience and you list out all of the things you learned along the way in those past jobs or life experiences. This is all for you, by the way, as the trainee. This is not to share with the mentor. It will come out in your resume or your talk. But this is just for you. None of this exercise is for the eyes of the mentor. What we're trying to build with this exercise is an inventory. And an inventory of skills, experiences, views, paradigms, and abilities that you can leverage for the benefit of the mentor, the benefit of the mentor's business. We're changing the way we look at this whole concept from one of seeking to get your card punched and your log signed by the mentor so that you can take off your pants and work in your underwear, so to speak, to one of seeking all the ways that you can bring something that adds value to the mentor's business that they almost can't refuse when you offer it to them. And what I'm suggesting is a huge concept, my friends, and it crosses all business boundaries, by the way. I've worked in many industries over the last 30-some years. I've consulted and coached in several industries. I've written business development programs for several of those. And these same things occur, but also are important. I see the same opportunities in all these different industries. But almost never has there been an industry like the appraisal industry that is so ripe for this kind of mindset. We use it on a daily basis, by the way. And I'll talk about that in a minute with our realtor and lender clients. But what I'm suggesting is huge. It's so huge that it may just change the way you look at absolutely everything. Every relationship you have, the way you communicate. It's one of my goals as a teacher and a content creator is to help you change your views. I've talked in other podcasts that my goal and my job, I feel, as a speaker, a trainer, a coach, a teacher, a mentor, a business person talking to people on a daily basis, is to help make the invisible visible, to help break down barriers of communication, conflict management, conflict resolution, languaging, syntax, how to use all of these tools to create greater understanding within the person I'm communicating with, understanding how they like to communicate, how they like to be communicated to. And so my job as a teacher and a content creator is to help potentially change your views on things so that your world opens up and you can get new results. Now, let me warn you. This concept is not a tactic. I use these two words, tactical and practical, when I'm about to talk about the steps that I want you to write down. The step 1, step 2, step 3, here's how you say it, here's the script. No, this is not a tactic. This is a mindset. I've said in other podcasts, I talk about strategy, and then I talk about tactical and practical, which are the steps below strategy. This is strategical thinking, or strategic thinking. It's a mindset. And the tactics that we eventually come up with, they usher forth from the mindset. The tactics, the tips, the tricks, the things that we're going to use, the language that we're going to use, ushers forth from this mindset. Not the other way around. And what we're talking about is giving more than you ever expect to gain in return. As you build the skills and abilities inventory that I'm suggesting you write out of all your past life experiences, your work experience, what you grew up learning, it could be sports, it could be high school, college, all of that stuff should go into the inventory. You should be thinking about how each one of those things, each one of those experiences, each one of those skills and abilities that you write down could lead to a benefit for your future mentor. Up to now, you likely looked at your resume as a way to impress. You did the same thing, a skills and abilities and past experiences inventory. But it was to write down and build up this massive list of things and experiences that you have that's going to impress somebody on the other side. And they go, wow, Mr. or Mrs. Johnson, your resume is quite impressive. You did all these things and you think you'd be a real asset? No. I'm talking about building that same resume as an exercise, skills and abilities inventory. But then we do a features benefits, just like I talked about in the last episode about adding value. You write down every skill, every feature you have. And all of your past experiences, of course, are features. In this instance. but then you write out what that feature, what that skill, what that past experience or ability means to somebody else. Because remember, they're always saying, well, what's in it for me? So you played college basketball. Who cares? What does that mean to me? Then you would write out, well, it means that I am not afraid to hustle. It means that I understand hard work. I had to get up at 5 a.m, go to practice, and then schoolwork, and then all these other things. It's your job to turn those features into benefits. What's typical in the corporate or business world is the standard resume that's meant to impress. Everybody does it. In my opinion, it's very off-putting. It's off-putting because I'm an entrepreneur. It's off-putting, I think, to most entrepreneurs like me, because we typically don't care that much about your impressive background or the jobs that you no longer have or are trying to leave. What entrepreneurs care about is value. They care about making money. They care about getting shit done. They care about gaining new clients. They care about taking care of the ones that they have. Becoming more efficient, creating new things. The entrepreneur loves the start and the creation of bringing something that didn't exist yesterday into the world today. That's what I love anyway. Watching things and people grow. Some of us get tremendous satisfaction from watching people grow. And just generally making things happen. Whatever value proposition you bring to an entrepreneur better enhance or add to that basic list. What many entrepreneurs have in the way of motivation and hustle, by the way, they often lack in other areas. This is where opportunity begins to match up. Entrepreneurs often lack in areas like marketing, managing. Some of them are just plain old horrible managers. I particularly don't like to manage. I think I'm a good manager because I've studied leadership, but I hate it. I hate the idea that I might have to manage somebody's tasks on an hourly or daily or even weekly basis. I'm self-motivated and I look for self-motivated people. So I don't like the word and I don't like the idea or concept, but I've done it. I've run businesses, I've owned businesses where I had to manage people and get results. And it can be very tiring. Some people love it. But entrepreneurs quite often aren't that great at communication. Again, they're good at a specific skill. They're good at hustle. They're good at the startup. They may not be that great at communication. They may not be that great at accounting, at sales, or some other area where they may be deficient. Where an entrepreneur is deficient in some area, there's huge opportunity to help them shore up that aspect of their business. So again, now I'm speaking directly to the potential trainee. Of course, not every entrepreneur is open to having their weaknesses pointed out. Many of them aren't self-aware enough, in fact, to even know that they're lacking in a lot of areas. Some of them think they're just the greatest thing ever. However, the main point of all this is that A, independent appraisers are at some level entrepreneurs. Those of us who have ventured out on our own and started companies, have brick and mortar offices, appraisers working under us, copy machines and flat screen TV, whatever you have in your office, we are at some level an entrepreneur, somebody who set out to do something, create something, and start a business. So they're entrepreneurs. They don't like working for somebody else. They ventured out on their own to do something, to undertake something. B, almost every single one of them, haven't met one yet that isn't in need of help in some area of their business. And your job as a potential new recruit is to interview the potential mentor, to figure out where that need exists, and then offer or come up with, develop a creative way to solve that problem. So let's talk practical in an appraiser's business. Many appraisers do primarily lender work. I'm going to get into one of the tactics, so to speak, for potential trainees to bring added value to a mentor's business. Many appraisers do primarily lender work. This is work for banks, mortgage companies, credit unions, AMCs, or appraisal management companies. You would already know this if you're studying the business. Anybody providing financial or financing for some type of loan. And while this type of work can be good, we do a ton of it, it can also be very fickle. It can be very revision heavy. It can be demanding, ultra time sensitive. I've talked about some of the ridiculous requests and turn times that some of the lenders and AMCs request. Not to mention very price sensitive. And many appraisers seek to do what is simply called non-lender work. So there's the lender work and then there's the non-lender work. And non-lender work consists of legal work, like divorce appraisals, dissolution of marriage, they're called, estate and date of death appraisals, appraisals for financial planners, people setting up estates and trusts, in-house portfolio type work, hard money lenders, realtor work, like pre-listing appraisals, tax and assessment appraisals, etc. There's a whole other side to our industry. However, many appraisers have almost no idea how to go after this type of business. And there's a variety of reasons. I'm going to get into those in some other podcasts as well. A few might just be they've never had it. They got right into the business and they went after the lender work. That's how my business started and expanded exponentially, was lender work. And it was because it was back in the day, pre-AMC really, pre-Dodd-Frank, where you could go out, didn't matter your level of licensing, and you could call on banks. And we brought in lunches and I gave talks and speeches, and my business grew exponentially with lender work. But I realized at some point I needed to alter my mix because of the fickleness of the business, and you have to go after non-lender work. I highly recommend appraisers switch their whole mix, by the way, to a greater percentage non-lender work. So many appraisers, they don't go after it either because they've never had it and they haven't made those contacts, or because they're scared to try something maybe different from what they've been doing. There are some differences in how you report, how you write the reports, and what you do. Maybe you just don't speak that language. You don't speak the language of attorneys. You don't like interacting with attorneys. I totally get it. But whatever the reason, helping an appraiser get new business, I should say, helping an appraiser not only get new business, even if it's in the type of business mix they're already doing, new lender work, but build a whole other segment to their business is a huge offer for an appraiser. Now, of course, if that appraiser doesn't want to be in that segment, then maybe it's not that advantageous for them. But it's certainly something I would recommend and offer. Now, you might be asking me, Blaine, how the heck am I supposed to go get business for an appraiser when I'm not even an appraiser myself? This is for the people who aren't licensed, or maybe licensed but not working for anybody else. To which I'd say, every problem has within it the seeds of the solution. And your job is not to figure out how to do it just yet. It's not. Your job is to posit the potential problems, to come up with, think of what are the potential problems that you can offer solutions for, or at least come to the table not with a handout, but with what I'll call a hand up for the other person's business. Your job at this point is to bring something to the appraiser mentor, the appraiser's business that they don't already have. It may actually be something they hadn't even thought about until they met you. It may be something like doing free office work in their office in exchange for training, which of course is an easy one, that's low-hanging fruit. It may be offering to hit the streets and set up meetings with attorneys, financial planners, estate planners, all potential non-lender work for the chief appraiser, the head of the business, to then come in and give the business winning discussion or the closing speech or whatever it might be. Almost like an outside salesperson. And with that new business, the new trainee can, of course, then start working. They can start working on that new business. It could be calling realtors and homeowners to offer some kind of measuring services or sketching services or desktop valuations. The ideas are almost endless when it comes to this exercise. The idea is to develop your skills and abilities inventory first, and then brainstorm what you think you have to offer. Then prospect for a meeting with a potential mentor. But here's the thing. When you're prospecting for a meeting with an appraiser, a potential mentor, somebody who's in business that you're looking to potentially train you, and it's super important who you pick, by the way, both for the mentor picking a trainee and the trainee picking a mentor. They are not all created the same. But here's the thing. When you're prospecting for an interview, not a job interview. You're prospecting to interview them. I'm speaking to the trainees. You're prospecting to interview the potential mentor, not to have them interview you. If you go into it with that mindset that, hey, I'd love to have you interview me to see if I'd be a good fit for your business, which is, by the way, language that's never used. You go into it to interview them. I'm not suggesting that you have an attitude and act like a boss. Well, what do you think your strengths and weaknesses are, Mr. Appraiser? No. I'm simply suggesting that you call and offer to bring them coffee, take them to coffee, meet for lunch, to pick their brain about the industry, about their business, whatever it be. You can do it all under the guise of wanting to learn more about the business so that you can be the best appraisal student ever. Not the best appraiser in the market. Sounds threatening to an appraiser. But so that you can be the best appraisal student ever. Don't even ask if they're accepting trainees at this point. In fact, you could call somebody and say, hey, I would love to pick your brain about the appraisal business, and I know you're busy, and I value your time. Can I take you to lunch? All I need is 20 minutes, a half an hour. Give them some kind of time constraint, a way that they can get out of it if it's not going well. Say, look, all I need is a half an hour. I'd love to pick your brain on this. And they might say, we're not really looking for trainees at this point. You go, oh, no. I totally get that. I'm not even looking for that. I just want to pick your brain. I'm licensed, and I've heard that you're one of the best in your market. I would love to pick your brain on how you did it. You're prospecting for a meeting. That's it. Don't ask if they're accepting trainees, because most of them aren't. They aren't because they haven't met you yet. And once they meet you and have a discussion about all the things you look to bring to a prospective mentor's business, you can simply end the meeting with a genuine, hey, I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy day to enlighten me. I've learned a lot. And oh, by the way, if you know of any other appraisers or appraiser offices who could use additional business, an outside salesperson, a business builder, whatever it is that you're offering, this value-added proposition I'm talking about, you then say, I'd certainly appreciate you passing my name and info along to them if you feel I'd be a good fit. And of course, always pay for their coffee or their lunch or whatever. Don't let them pay for you. And I say this often. If you haven't listened to prior episodes, please go back and listen to some of the prior episodes, because I talk a lot about languaging, about syntax, about communication, how your words come across to other people, the hidden messages within them, and the importance of words and language in your daily life. And this kind of language that I just mentioned is the language of what I would call the language of prose. Not that I'm saying I'm a pro. I'm saying the way you communicate that, though, is for pros. It's not for the weak. It's definitely not for those who are simply seeking to get their hours in and have somebody hand them business and money and opportunity and a career. This is one of the big problems in our industry, I believe. This type of thinking is so prevalent in the industry, and it's one of kind of a selfish, you can't tell me what to do attitude. Maybe it's the result of being beat up for so many years by lenders and underwriters or whatever, AMCs, but it's definitely damaging to our image. What it has done, however, is create an opportunity for creative, service-minded appraisers who see themselves as true service providers and strategic partners with their clients, and who know how to communicate and know how to bring value. If you want to work with these kinds of appraisers as a trainee, by the way, you better be the type of individual that can bring some value, bring something to the table instead of asking for a handout. Whoa, you say, Blaine, nobody's asking for a handout. To which I say, if you've sent out a resume asking for somebody to mentor you, you are, in essence, asking for a handout. For there to be a fair value exchange, there has to be something of value offered first. And it has to be offered first from you as the trainee, with no expectation of return before you can ever ask for anything from anybody else. I don't care that that's how it's done in the corporate world, where you just, resumes and college degrees matter more than hustle and ingenuity in bringing value. Because in the world, again, of the entrepreneur, creativity and value add are the words of the day. Bring your absolute best game to the park, and you may just have a shot. Come with a request for the appraiser mentor to fill your coffers and help you get business and sign your experience log, which is basically what a resume is a sure recipe for disappointment and failure. And in fact, I have a recent experience that I'd like to share with you. Because we get resumes, inquiries each month from potential appraisers looking for an opportunity. I just had one recently. Now, this particular individual's resume actually was quite good from a resume standpoint. Not only just a sheer general standard resume standpoint, but also for the industry. Some real estate experience, but also this particular person's resume indicated that they have high levels of college training and some other technical experience. I don't want to go too much into detail because if this person is listening, they'll know I'm speaking about them. But I was actually impressed by the resume. However, as is my standard behavior in these instances, I will always return a phone call, whether if I get a phone call from the person, an email, or a resume. I always return a phone call. I never just set them aside and never get back to them. Sometimes it takes a week or two, but I always call back, and I called this person back. And I said, hey, you took the initiative to send the resume. I really appreciate it. It's quite impressive, actually. Looks like you have some experience in all these different areas. Could be an asset to somebody's business. However, we are not in a position to offer any apprenticeships at the moment. We have this many apprentices, and this is our office situation, and we're not looking to bring anybody else on. But here's what I always say. But I would be willing to meet with you. This is me, by the way, going out of my way. I'm not trying to pat myself on the back. I'm just telling you how I go about things because it's going to lead up to what I call a test. I always say I'd be happy to meet with you, even though we're not offering an opportunity. I'd be happy to sit down with you and talk about the industry and give you some tips and tricks and some ideas and advice, which I'm always willing to do, by the way. And this individual said, oh, yeah, no, I totally understand. Yeah, I appreciate that. Let me look at my schedule. That sounds good. Let me look at my schedule, and I'll get back with you, and we can do that. Now, this has been well over a month, I think almost probably going on 2 months, and I don't believe this person has any intention of taking me up on my offer. Now, if this was you, excuse me, I should say, if this was me in his position, I've just outed him as a man, if I didn't already. If this was me in his position, and I called up and somebody said, hey, there's no opportunity here in that regard, that area right now, but I'd be willing to take time out of my busy day to meet with you. And the person, and if I said, yeah, let me look at my schedule and I'll get back with you, and a month goes by and I haven't got back with that person, what message does that send to the person that was willing to meet with me? Well, it sends a very clear message that they wanted one and only one thing from me when they sent the resume. They wanted me to give to them. Because when they heard that there's no opportunity here right now, and the keywords are right now, their mind shut down. They thought, okay, on to the next one. There's no opportunity in that person's business. Okay, on to the next one. Hey, thanks, appreciate it. And then everything after that, mind was closed, ears were closed, and they just went, yeah. No, that's cool. Yeah. Let's get together for coffee. Sure, I'll look at my schedule. So that's what we call a shit test. And I've been doing it for years and years and years, not just in this business. I've done it with potential live-in students in my Aikido and Zen school and in other businesses. You test the person to see what their motivation and hustle and ingenuity and mindset is. Because most people are out there just looking for an opportunity for themselves. They're not thinking in terms of added value for the other person. If it were me in that gentleman's position, and somebody said, hey, there's no opportunity here right now for a trainee, but I'd be willing to take my time to sit and give you some advice and talk to you about the industry, I would jump. I would jump because I know a couple things about myself. If I can get in front of you, I think I have a fairly good chance of impressing you with my communication skills, with how I carry myself and my past work experience and what I can bring to your business. Because when I go into that coffee meeting with that business owner, I'm listening for a couple things. Not what opportunity is there for me, based on what I asked. I'm listening, what opportunity is there in things that their business needs? And how could I fill those opportunities, either with creating something new for them or bringing some skill set that I already have in my bag. And so when I said to that gentleman, hey, I'd be willing to take my time to meet with you for coffee and talk about the industry and give you some tips and advice, I'm basically saying to them, I'm granting you an interview, impress me. But of course, what he heard was, not taking on any trainees. Okay, boom, I'm done. Blown opportunity. And it happens all the time. And I'll give you one other example and then we'll wrap up this episode. I spoke in the last episode, how to add value, how appraisers can add value to the process episode. If you haven't listened to it, please go back and listen, because in there I talk about, or at least gave a brief mention to the fact that I have been giving talks and doing workshops and things like that for realtors and lenders for several years now. I think I'm a good teacher, a fairly reasonable speaker and communicator, and so that's one of my skill sets and one of my strengths, and it's helped my business grow exponentially. It's helped put me in front of key people that have helped build my business. And I recommend it, by the way, to every appraiser out there. If you're not doing it, you're missing a huge opportunity in that regard. But what I talked about in the last episode was how I then kind of systematized my talks. I wrote out outlines and scripts and things like that. So now we have titles to many of our talks and our workshops and our appraiser boot camps and things like that we give to that we do for realtors and lenders. But then I took the next step, which was to get some of those talks and some of those workshops and some of those trainings approved for Con Ed in our market, which is a fairly straightforward process. I won't say it's easy, but it's fairly straightforward. And once you figure out how to do it properly, how to create your syllabus and all that stuff, it's pretty straightforward. And once you get approved for Con Ed, of course, a couple things happen. One, you get on a list that when realtors and companies like that are looking to have their people, their employees or their real estate agents get their Con Ed in, which they have to get in every year, they look for courses. And they have to take a combination of either legal, fill so many legal Con Ed hours and so many elective Con Ed hours. And of course, the electives, they want to learn something new. Realtors are great at this. They're always being, and lenders as well, they're always keeping up on training and motivation and continuing education, whether it's for Con Ed credits or just their own edification. So when you develop a course or a talk and you get it approved for Con Ed, you make yourself more available with benefits for them. So as I was just getting to say, two things happen. One, you open yourself up to be called by a real estate company to come in and give that talk, whether it's an hour, 2 hour, 4 hour talk for Con Ed, and get paid for it, by the way. They will pay you per credit hour, but that is not why I did it. I make too much in my business to think that starting a separate silo or profit center by doing Con Ed classes would be beneficial to me. For some, maybe it would. But I'm just far too busy in my other areas that getting paid $200 or $300 or $400 or $500 to give a multi-hour talk and training, while fun, isn't necessarily a profitable way or efficient way to spend my day. So I didn't do it to make money. Although I will get paid when they hire me for those Con Ed classes, I get paid. I did it. I should caveat that. I should say I don't always get paid, because sometimes they ask and I say, be happy to do it for free for your company. Sometimes they're bigger groups and I know it's beneficial for me to get in front of them. So we don't always charge. In fact, 90% of the time we don't. It's a benefit for all of us. My point being that when you get your course approved for Con Ed, you are adding value for the realtor. It's the same talk that they're having me come in and give for the last 10 years. How to think like an appraiser. We have a course called Think Like an Appraiser, Speak Like an Attorney, Party Like a Rock Star. And real estate companies will call me to give that multi-hour training. And I've been doing it for years and years and years. And they don't pay me to do it. I love doing it because I get in front of those clients. But having that course now approved for Con Ed means I'm now adding, when they call me to do that same class that I've been teaching for them for years, and they can call me again and have me teach it, but now their realtors can get Con Ed credits for it, I'm bringing value to them. I'm adding value to their business as a result. I hope you're picking up this mindset. My point of that whole story was that I went after the Con Ed approval so that my courses could add more. I already knew my courses were adding value to them because of what they learn, what they walk away from, the clients I gain as a result, the calls that I get every week from the realtors that I've met, and the problems that we solve in the market. I already knew there's tremendous value there, but I wanted a way to add more value. And one of those ways was to get the courses approved for Con Ed credits. Now the students can sit in the classroom, whether it's 5, 20, 40, or 300, and they can all get Con Ed credits, which go to help them renew their license. It's about adding value. If you're a trainee, if you're a potential trainee, if you're thinking about getting in the business, if you want to be an appraiser, you need to be bringing some value. You need to be adding some value. So on your search for a mentor, please, 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 sit down, write out your skills and abilities inventory, and then take each one of those things that you write out and figure out a way that it can help the mentor and the mentor's business. And some of it may be in ways that the mentor doesn't even know they need help in, or what could benefit them in their business. That's your job to bring that, to open up new doors, create new opportunities, and see things in a new way. That's it for this episode, my friends, and as always, I hope that I have provided you with some value and some insight. In fact, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the topic. Hit me up on Facebook or Instagram. It's Real Value King on Instagram. Give me your experiences and input on this topic. I'd love to start a discussion. We also just recently built a Facebook page just for the podcast, the Real Value Cast. It's a brand new page, so there's nothing on it now, but I hope to start building that up as well so that you know exactly where to go to get the content and start those discussions. I'd also like to mention that there is bonus content for this episode. I mentioned it earlier. I promised bonus content to those of you who were kind enough to subscribe via the podcast website, realvaluecast.com, or my personal business website, I should say, not my personal website, realvaluegroup.com. If you want to explore the concept a little deeper that I talked about in this episode, especially the law of the onion, I've recorded, again, an additional 20 minutes or so, I think 15 or 20 minutes of content on this particular topic. And you get it by joining the Real Value Tribe, as we call it, at realvaluecast.com. No disrespect to my iTunes, Stitcher, Podbean, Blueberry, Libsyn subscribers, wherever you're getting the podcast feed. I love and appreciate every single one of you, but I can only deliver the bonus content privately, and in an effort to keep these episodes from getting even longer than they already are, and going off on tangents and topics that I don't think are necessarily related to our business or our industry, although I think they're great topics to get into, I decided to create bonus content for things that I think are really valuable. So it doesn't matter to us if the email that you use is your spam email address that you only use for subscriptions and to test out, internet offers, and whatever it is. As long as you whitelist us and you're getting the content and the information, we will send it to you there. It's your education and enlightenment is of the highest order here at the Real Value Studios and Labs. Now, last but certainly not least, I would like to give a special Real Value Cast shout out to my new friend Jamie Owen over at Aspen Appraisal Services. Jamie has been extremely kind and supportive to us here at Real Value Cast and the Real Value Podcast. He always likes and comments on our Instagram and Facebook posts, as many of you do. But he's been very gracious to include the Real Value Podcast on his website on a special page called Appraisers Making a Difference. And when he told me this, I was tremendously honored because I went there and I saw, and to be included in this particular area of his website is to be amongst a bunch of folks who have been making a difference in the realm of blogging and podcasting and creating content much longer than I have. They've had a tremendous impact, at least in the appraisal industry. A couple of names, Jonathan Miller's Housing Notes, Ryan Lundquist's Sacramento Appraisal Blog. If you don't know Ryan, go check out sacramentoappraisalblog.com. Tom Horn's Birmingham Appraisal Blog, Shannon Slater's Appraisal Blog, Mark Skapanet's The People's Appraisal Blog, George Dell. If you don't know who George Dell is, a statistician extraordinaire, great teacher. Dustin Harris, the appraiser coach, Rachel Massey, Phil Crawford, voice of the appraiser, and several others. I'm super honored to have been included on that page and amongst those individuals as well. So, Jamie, thank you very much for doing that. If you aren't familiar with some of those people, by the way, go back and listen to those names and Google all of them because they all add value in some way. So thanks again for listening and following along, my friends. Hope you got some value from it, and I look forward to talking to you on the next episode.